Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Jeffrey Halstead, DMD. Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram. Today we continue our series previewing local elections across the Finger Lakes by catching up with one of the candidates running for Cayuga County Legislature in District Number 5. Joshua Czyz joins me via Zoom. Joshua, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the easiest question I'm going to ask you all hour here. Why are you running?
Well, you might say I lost my mind. I never thought I'd get in politics. Never had a plan to. But I think it starts with a motivation I've always had to serve the community. And so when for years I've been a pastor and been a chaplain. Since 2008, I've been chaplain for multiple organizations within the city government. And I've served the community as a pastor and certainly as a chaplain through the years. I started to get involved. I stopped pastoring, but I started to get involved politically just to help some people behind the scenes. Never saw myself doing anything with it, but I was asked to consider it. And I said, no, I'm busy, got a lot going on, but I'll keep helping other people. I would say the thing that pushed me over the edge, so to speak, to say yes to it this year was that my two oldest boys, I've got six boys, and my two oldest moved away this summer. Now, they're 20 and 21 years old, typical time frame to move away, typical to kind of go in and experience things themselves. But the thing is, I don't anticipate them coming back. I don't anticipate that they're going to return to Cayuga County. And, one is probably because of his career, he's going to have to go where the career takes him. One is just not intending to. We are a very tight family. I mean, we talk to each other all the time still since his move. But he doesn't want to be here. And while I think a lot of that is stuff that's out of our control at a county level, what it motivated me to do was jump in to have an impact where I can have an impact, and I can at a county level. And so I looked at what is, where we are as a county, as a legislature. I looked at some of our recent history and, my opponent and her stances on things and her approach to things, her chairmanship of the legislature through COVID and around that time frame. And I looked at our district and I thought, I know she's got a long history here and, name recognition and all that, but looking at the at least the registration of our district, I feel like I'm a good match for our district, and I feel like I would represent our district well. And so I decided I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring and give our district an option.
You take a chance.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I don't think that story you just described, I don't think that's going to be very uncommon for a lot of parents across the region.
Sure.
Is that one of the bigger issues or bigger themes that you're seeing stand out when you go when you are campaigning and you're talking to different folks in District 5?
Yeah, well, I am talking to a lot of people who themselves are considering moving out. They're considering leaving, right? They're fed up, and I say a lot of people. It's not like it's the majority or even close, but it's enough people that it's alarming. It's concerning, right? So, what I am speaking to people about though does connect. So really, for me, when I think about running, I think about, a family-friendly community, and what does that mean to me? That means a place where our kids want to be when they grow up, right? If they could find a career anywhere, they'd want to find it here if they had the option, right? But it also means public safety. I've always been a big supporter of our law enforcement, certainly of our fire service. I've dedicated my life to serving law enforcement. That's a lot of what I do as far as my chaplaincy work right now. I certainly. Taxes are a concern, right? Inflation is a concern. So when you talk about finances, when you talk about the money that people are concerned about, well, what are we doing locally to make sure that we increase business, right? And we support, for us, farmers are our lifeblood in our county, right? So how do we support our farmers? And how do we support business and decrease the tax burden at the same time, right? So those are kind of all the themes that I'm hearing that are driving me to run.
So, of course, a few people listening to this are going to say, well, we need more economic development. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Micron, obviously, a lot of promise with Micron for Central New York as a whole. Cayuga County surely will be some sort of beneficiary there.
Yeah.
What does successful economic development look like in your district? What's your vision for that? Like, what does that look like to you?
So one of the things that I think I bring to the table in almost anything is I'm one who will hear, I'm willing to hear all perspectives on something, right? And try to get an understanding of what everyone's vested interest is in something, and try to be a collaborator in that, right? I feel like so we'll take Micron, for example. I agree. This is a tremendous opportunity for our county. Certainly, an incredible thing for Onondaga County, but we stand to benefit significantly from that. And so while I see tremendous opportunity with business, and like I just said, decreasing tax burden, which means we have to increase opportunities for business in our county, and certainly in my district, I would love to see that. But at the same time, we have to consider where that's going to go and how that's going to be, right? When you consider, neighbors that want to weigh in on that. And those are always difficult tensions. And there's not always an easy solution, but I think I've become a good person to try to manage tensions like that and try to understand, all right, there's some give and take here. Let's find some compromise that works for everybody. And Micron is certainly that. We're going to have to, if we want to benefit from this, we're going to have to find spots for companies that are going to feed into Micron and companies that are going to facilitate distribution for Micron, right? And support companies that are going to produce things that Micron needs, right? So we're going to need to be proactive in finding that stuff. But we can't just push our way through something and frustrate an entire section of our community if it's something that they don't want, right next door.
Understandable. Many believe that environmental issues are the biggest ones facing the region. HABs, drinking water sources, Owasco Lake, of course, invasive species, tourism, economic development, all those things. You can't really have a conversation about any of them without it going back to protecting the region's natural resources. So I'm kind of curious, what's your thought process on how you'd like to see the legislature approach those things? Obviously, Owasco Lake has been on the forefront of the legislature's work over the last 4 years. What would you like to see, though, in the next 4, if you could kind of paint that picture for us?
Yeah, I've really tried to dig into this to get a good understanding of it. I know that my opponent's been pretty involved with things dealing with water, and what I've come to learn, and I'm still learning. So I don't mean to speak with authority on this at all, but what I've come to learn in talking to people who are very invested into this, some of the organizations that are leading the way in this, is we really did a good job coming up with a plan to address this, right? We've really looked at the science, we've really looked at the issues, and we came up with a plan. But what happened toward the end of the submission of that plan is there was a breakdown in, one of the key issues, one of the key aspects of the plan is, impact of runoff, right? That's predominantly below the lake, right? And so when you look at the number of farms that we have in our watershed versus others, the biggest, gain to stand is in the runoff that's happening around farms. But what happens somewhere in the conversation is my sense that the farmers began to be to feel viewed as the problem, right? Not as someone who stands to gain from this and someone who might be able to contribute the most to this and maybe benefit from this, right? But there was somehow some communication that made them feel like they were the problem, when in fact there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of issues. Now, yes, runoff around the farms and other issues, and it's not just the farms themselves, it's the tributaries, there's a lot of movement in them, right? There's a lot going on there. So I have the sense that failed leading up to the submission of our plan. And what's happened as a response is that now some of our lawmakers are calling out for TMDLs, right, total mass daily limits, and that the farms and the tributaries from the farms are non-point sources, right? So we're calling out something that again is pushing the farmers, thinking they're like we're calling them the problem, when in reality, not only are they not the problem, but the solution that we're asking for and to put some regulation on them isn't even going to solve the issue, right? And so to me, we need to get everybody back to the table again and say, hey, we've got this plan. How can we all work together to make it happen, rather than pointing fingers about who needs to do what and what regulations we need to implement? I think I don't know a farmer who doesn't want clean water, right? I don't know a farmer who doesn't need the water that we're supplying out of our lake. I don't know a farmer who doesn't care about the environment, right? Now, there may be some that have some practices that they could improve, but I think a huge portion of our farmers are already doing a tremendous amount to make sure that they're. They don't want to waste their money, right? They don't want erosion, which means they don't want to lose land, right? They don't want to overspray because that costs a lot of money. So I think we got to be careful about how we dialogue about this, and we got to make sure we get them back to the table to talk about it.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about
Sure.
rural fire and EMS service. Obviously, both of those have become challenging services for communities of all sizes to maintain. But whether we're talking about response time or cost of service, what are you hearing from voters in District Number 5 on this front? What do they want to see from the county when it comes to fire and EMS service and ensuring that they are maintained throughout the county over the next several years?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm not hearing anything about that in my door-to-door, right? I'm not hearing that as a predominant topic of conversation. It is something that I am concerned about. I'm a volunteer at Owasco Fire Department. I'm their chaplain as well. I'm more their chaplain than anything, but I am registered as a member of the fire department. And I see the challenges. I see the challenges not only here, I see the challenges everywhere. And I do think it's a looming potential crisis that we're going to need to figure out, right? If we don't see more volunteerism, more people stepping into our volunteer departments, and certainly the costs of the technology is a wonderful thing, and it's saved lives, and it's made the fire service better and better, but it's expensive. There's a lot of cost to it, and so again, it's not something I'm hearing day to day, door to door, but it's certainly on my mind.
Public safety recruiting obviously is a very big challenge for basically every law enforcement agency across the region.
Oh, yeah.
How do you think, when you talk to folks about public safety, about the sheriff's office, how do you think the legislature could approach this in the future to hopefully keep Cayuga County in a good position on the recruiting front and retention?
Yeah, this is one of those challenges, because it goes directly against my goal to keep budgets down. But when it comes to law enforcement, we can't compromise. And what we need to recognize is, as much as I think our sheriff does a great job getting out into the community, I think our sheriff's office does a great job getting out into the community, right? That some of the investment in that is going to be years later, right? Because it's going to be the children that encounter our sheriff's office that years later may want to step in and help with recruitment. So that's great. But in the short term, one of the things that is clear is it's challenging enough to recruit, and then it's even more challenging to hold on to good folks if there are better paying opportunities nearby. And so the one thing that I think the Ledge can do is to make sure that we're paying competitively, right? So to look at our surrounding area, and not to say that we need to be number one at the top of the list, but are we paying in a way that's going to keep maybe stop the bleeding, keep people from jumping from Cayuga County to a nearby county. Otherwise, I don't know that there's too much that falls on the county Ledge to do to have an impact there, right? That, like you said, this is pervasive. This is something that we've seen prior to 2020 was tough. Since 2020 has been very, very challenging. And I think law enforcement in general is having to figure out some ways to make sure that they stop the bleeding with loss and build recruitment. But budget is probably our biggest impact.
Speaking of expensive things, infrastructure, always very expensive. I found it interesting that the number one discussed infrastructure issue in Cayuga County that we're hearing from the feedback we're getting from readers and viewers and listeners is broadband access and quality of broadband. Is that an issue that you see as one that the county needs to be a little more aggressive with, or do you think things are relatively okay right now across the county?
Yeah, great question. So I haven't heard, again, as far as public discussions, I haven't heard anything about that. But how do I feel about it? Well, I might have felt differently going before COVID, right before 2020, and what I recognized as a family of 8, right? At the time, we had 8 people in our home, and everybody working from home online. We needed some pretty heavy duty, high speed service, right? And so we had to make a change, and we were fortunate to be able to do that and afford to do that. And but not everybody is, and not everybody was, and not that certainly. If I can have any say to it, we won't be doing full scale shutdowns ever again. That would certainly be my desire. But recognizing that there's a lot more work from home, more people are working from home. Students do have the opportunity to do work from home, college from home, all that stuff, and broadband certainly is. I wouldn't at all say it's a right for everybody to have access to it, but I do think it's something that's becoming more of a necessity. The other side of that is when it comes to being a corridor that's attracting places like Micron, right? One of the things that Onondaga County has done well is to be a corridor that is advancing things like that, right? So I don't know the solution. I don't know the best way to approach it. But I'd certainly be, again, open to that discussion to say, hey, what can we do as a county? Is there something we should do as a county? Is there something that should be done privately that we can encourage? What's the best way to approach it? But definitely make advances in that area would be great.
So this kind of leads into a bunch of the stuff that you've talked about so far. Housing, whether we're talking about median housing stock, rent prices, or senior housing availability, all three are major issues. Given what's coming down the line with Micron, how do you think the legislature should approach these housing related issues? Because there could, in theory, be a boon here relatively soon that the county simply has to meet. Do you think the county is ready for that?
Yeah, so I do think we have time, right? There's some time that we have before we start seeing the boon, as you mentioned. But it is something we need to start looking at now. And so I do think I think some studies would be relevant to say, all right, where do we need housing? What would that look like? I'm a big fan of allowing, the private side of the world to make that happen. You realize there are entrepreneurs who are going to see opportunities to make money here, right? And so they're going to see the need for housing. We have contractors all around here who are going to be looking for opportunities to build developments, build apartments, things like that might benefit them, but at the same time solve potential housing issues down the road. If it's something where we see that there's a further need and the county needs to get involved, then I think it's worth looking at that. But again, I wouldn't say that it should fall on the county to necessarily be the driver in that development, right? We can lead the way. We can certainly open doors and create opportunities for people to step in, but not in a way that we are dictating where things are going and how things are going up. Does that make sense?
Does part of that involve helping perhaps some of the communities cut through or perhaps lessen the red tape that's involved with development? No housing development is going to go up in 6 months, of course. But when a process takes 2 to 3 years to get to, just to a point where construction is happening, which is a story we've heard a few times across the region, that can be a deterrent to developers or would-be developers. Is that something that you think that the county could potentially at least play a role in voicing to everybody involved, hey, this is something that maybe we can do a little better?
Well, so I'm certainly an advocate for using the voice of the county, the legislature, the whoever is chair, the voice of the chair, to have an impact there. Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that makes our state, challenging is you have multiple levels of government, and so, I don't think it's our place as the county to step in and tell a township or a city what they need to do or how they need to do it, right? But can we voice our encouragement to maybe tidy things up a little bit, make things a little bit more efficient? Absolutely, but at the same time, I'm sure we can become more efficient in some things ourselves. And so to me, that would be the starting point, is to not necessarily tell others how they can do better, but maybe make sure that we're doing our absolute best to make sure that things are flowing for people who are trying to develop business here.
My last question for you is the easy one. Where can folks learn more about your campaign? Yeah,
so thank you. Facebook.com/Joshua M. Czyz, CZYZ. JOSHUAMCZYZ. There's a link to a page. You can certainly donate to the campaign. We're still doing everything we can to get out there, and so I appreciate any support that we can get. My email address is joshua.czYZ@gmail.com. And if somebody's interested in learning more information or getting a sign to put in their yard, I would welcome a call or an email from them. All right.
All right, Joshua, thanks so much for the time today. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That'll do it for this edition of FLX Today. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, check out the show on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to the FingerLakes1.com YouTube channel. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.